Hello, friends. Every year, Canadian government spends about $12.3 billion abroad, and most Canadians don't have any idea the magnitude of that amount of money. So in this particular episode, we'll look into the details and how the government tracks those aids and whether they are effective or not. I guess you can probably guess already that it's not, and it's not transparent. So let's dive in, and hopefully you can raise your voice and demand from the government that public deserve a transparent, verifiable, and accurate information about where the public dollar is going. And as you will see, that this $12.3 billion can build hospitals, schools, other healthcare priorities immensely across the country. So thank you. Let's dive in. Before we dive in, let's get the headline number on the screen. Canada is seventh largest foreign aid donor in the world by OECD standards. We spent about $12.3 billion in 2023 to 2024 alone. To put that in perspective, that's enough to build 62 new hospitals or fund the entire federal healthcare transfers to 3 provinces. And here's the first twist. About 19% of that money, roughly $2.3 billion, never actually crossed our border. So, what's really going on here? Let's break it down. The question isn't whether Canada should give foreign aid. That it's up to the people and the government. However, most Canadians across the political spectrum support some level of it, of course. The real question is, does our aid actually do what we say it does? Do we know who's getting it? Do we know if it's working? And is the amount determined by global need or by which party is in power in Ottawa? We are going to try to answer all 4 of those questions today. Of the $12.3 billion total, $10.1 billion qualifies as official development assistance. That's the gold standard category tracked by OECD. The remaining $2.2 billion covers things like peacekeeping, military contributions, and loan instruments. Now, for a taxpayer's gut check, $12.3 billion would build 62 hospitals at $200 million average cost, roughly. It would fund Canada's entire federal health transfer to 3 provinces. I'm not saying we should stop the aid. I'm saying, do we really know if we are getting that value? The Auditor General says we are not tracking it well enough to answer that. So think about it. Auditor General already opined on this particular issue. Here are Canada's top recipients of international assistance, and the results may surprise you, or may not, depending if you are paying attention, like I do time to time. The biggest single line item, refugee support cost inside Canada, $2.3 billion. Just think about it, $2.3 billion. More on that in a moment. However, secondly, the UN agencies, $1.7 billion, covering UNICEF, WHO, UNHCR, WFP, World Food Programs, and UNDP. Third, the World Bank and IMF, $1.2 billion. Fourth, Ukraine bilateral aid, 840 million. Then the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and malaria at 400 million. Then, of course, Ethiopia, Palestine, and Bangladesh, DR Congo, and Haiti further down the list. Keep those relative size in mind as we go through the rest of this, because these numbers would make more sense. So, about that $2.3 billion that stays in Canada, here is something most people don't know. Canada counts the cost of processing, housing, supporting refugee claimants inside our own border as foreign aid. Under OECD DFC accounting rules, this is legal and accepted internationally. But when you ask the average Canadian whether foreign aid should be spent on Canadian immigration services, most people would say that doesn't feel right. And the numbers are growing. In donor refugee costs are up 150% since 2019, I believe. Canada spends 19% of its aid budget domestically. So that's a large number spent domestically. That's above the OECD average of 13.8%, though below the UK at 28. And that's a different story, UK's issue. The question is, should Canadians know this? Absolutely, or do most know about this? No. Not all aid is the same, and that distinction matters when we evaluate impact. Humanitarian aid is like emergency food, water, shelter, and medical care. The high impact, verifiable, and people understand that quite clearly. And they are short term. Development aid, which are in long term, such as building schools, health system, governance, those are hard to measure and takes long time, some cases even decades. Military and security aid. Think Ukraine. It has a clear geopolitical rationale, but is the most politically charged also. Multilateral aid goes to UN agency, broad reach but high administrative overhead, and we know UN's cost structure. I guess that's a subject matter for another episode in future. In respect to donor refugee cost, we just covered those earlier. And the financial instruments area, the concessional loans and equity investments can actually generate returns for Canada. So the problem is we're not being clear with Canadians about which is which or how much each one actually achieves. There should be more transparency, and somebody from the government, like the ministers involved, they should really communicate that to the people with a verifiable number on a regular basis. But you hardly hear about it, and the media doesn't really ask and don't care to investigate further. Now let's look at the 4 recipients that dominates the news cycle and see what the actual Canadian data says. For example, Ukraine, 840 million in bilateral aid last year. Cumulative since February 2022, 25.5 billion. Canada is the 5th largest donor to Ukraine globally. The rationale is NATO stability, sovereignty, and deterrence impact from Russian aggression. Palestine issue, specifically Gaza and West Bank, Canada has committed over $355 million since October 2023. The baseline program is about $167 million per year. Delivery is severely restricted by current conflict. Of course, all of you know about it. Canada also paused UNRWA UNRWA funding and later partially resumed it. Now, Lebanon issue, $10 million aid. Organization call it, quote, poultry tokenism, which is partially true. That's 10 million is nothing compared to other big numbers that we have seen. On the other hand, Israel, which is a high-income OECD country, received no development or humanitarian aid from Canada. So a lot of people may not know that Israel don't get any aids from Canada. However, there is an ongoing controversy about arms exports, with roughly 95 million in military goods approved through end of 2025 after Canada paused new permits in January 2024. What this comparison actually tells us is that Canada's aid allocation is heavily influenced by geopolitics and news cycle, not just development need. So the aid is mixed up with a bunch of policy issue that's influenced by politics and partisan influences. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The Auditor General found that 24 out of 26 of the Global Affairs Canada's policy indicators could not be verified because of poor data collection and record keeping. That's shocking, and it's allowed to continue like that. $3.5 billion in annual bilateral aid has no confirmed outcome tracking against Canada's own feminist international assistance policy. Senior management literally could not review the complete impact of their own programming because the data was never rolled up to the departmental level. Now, there are things we can measure. Canada's contribution to the World Food Programme reached 12 million people. Global Fund has put 50 million people on AIDS treatment. Ukraine's sovereignty, while contested, has been preserved with NATO coalition support. But the ratio of what we can verify versus what we can't is deeply troubling for a $12 billion budget. And these are a lot of money. And as we emphasized earlier, this money could go and help many Canadian societies. A lot of people need those funds here. In fairness, there are strong arguments for Canadian foreign aid, no doubt. Global Affairs Canada argues that aid prevents crisis from reaching our border, reducing future cost in immigration, defense, and emergency responses. Results Canada points out that every dollar invested in global health returns $30 in economic productivity. Soft power is real, that's true. Canada's aid posture gives us influence in multilateral institutions such as UN voting blocs and trade negotiation. Disease prevention matters globally, of course. The Global Fund's results are among the most documented in development, and aid recipients do become trading partners at some point. Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and Haiti have all been growing export markets for Canadian goods. The case for aid is real. It's the execution and accountability and transparency. That's where the problem lies. And that's where public needs more direct insight. On the other hand, the critics have points too on their side. The Macdonald-Laurier Institute has called for far more oversight, pointing out that billions leave Canada with no verified outcome. Conservative critics argue the money goes to dictators, corrupt regimes, and UN bureaucracies. Food Banks Canada notes that 2 million Canadians use food banks every month, while 12 billion heads out the door. The domestic affordability crisis, housing, healthcare, inflation, I'm sure all of you know that very well, is not hypothetically connected to federal spending choices. These trade-offs are real, and political branding point is important too. Both parties have historically shaped aid to appeal to their base, not to maximize outcomes for recipients. The problem isn't that the critics are wrong, it's that without good data, we can't even have a honest debate about the trade-offs and have those debates um, available to the citizens. Now let's talk about the politics. Under Liberal governments, Canada adopted the Feminist International Assistance Policy in 2017. And I suppose you can guess who was in power at that time. And committed to increasing aid towards the UN's 0.7% of GNI target and expanded refugee-related domestic cost as ODA. Liberal critics say this is internationalist branding that substitute good optics for accountability. Under the conservative governments, historically, which is Prime Minister Harper, tied aid to commercial interest and redirected away from countries he considered hostile. The 2019 platform promised a 25% cut. The 2025 platform promises to cut aid going to dictators and useless global bureaucracy. Here's what the academic research actually says. Successive governments exhibit great continuity in their aid programs. The rhetoric changes dramatically. The funding flows much less so. Both parties brand aid to appeal their domestic base, and neither has solved the accountability problem or transparency issue. So here's our usual winners and losers ledger. So who wins and who bears the risk in the current system? The winners, of course, UN agencies and the NGO sector. They get 1.7 billion in stable, predictable funding every year. Ukraine, in the current period, of course, 25.5 billion in support since 2022, I believe. I could be wrong, with a clear geopolitical rationale, and that's understandable. Global public health, 50 million people on HIV treatment, that's much deserved, through the Global Fund. Canada's diplomatic profile, we have a seat at the table we couldn't otherwise access. Risk bearer or the losers in this case are Canadian taxpayers, which is always seems to be the case. The taxpayers always lose. 12.3 billion a year with limited verifiable return, domestic healthcare and housing chronically underfunded, 2 million Canadians using food banks monthly while billions head abroad with poor tracking, and Parliament itself, which literally cannot verify what our 12.3 billion actually achieves. That last one is the one that should worry all of us, regardless of where you sit politically on this topic. Bottom line is each dollar should be accountable and should be verifiable. And we should demand at least the very least of it. Here's my verdict on this issue. Giving donation and helping others in the world is a noble cause, and nobody disputes that we should help where the help is needed and within our means. It's like in your personal life. You help people, you donate whatever you can within your own means. You don't go beyond your means. And in this case, for government purposes, government need to be transparent and accountable to the people and be frank and provide accurate data that's verifiable and can be tracked. And also, we should narrow our focus of where the money should go, not bunch of different areas that actually don't fall within the concept of aid or donation. So we have to be very careful, and the government should be very honest and frank with the people before they spend the public money. And particularly when there's this 13 billion or the big numbers are spent, I believe that government should seek consent through referendum or other means from the public to spend those money. When we vote for all these politicians, we were never really told all the details. We're just really given some broad, general kind of a thing they will do. They will improve the economy. They will have better healthcare. They will do all rosy, flowery, nice thing. And they use the emotional influence and impact on people to go and vote one party or the other. So we don't really have any choice. We don't have any third option, either A or B. So this is the game that has been playing for, I guess, for a long time, and there's no end to it. But when it comes to this particular matter, I think a little bit more transparency from the government is absolutely needed when we have millions of people are going to the food bank and they need healthcare and other important spending domestically. So we should also, as I mentioned, that spend within our means and help wherever we can with the targeted focus, and that can actually achieve the policy objective of the donation in the first place, not just a bunch of different things. So anyway, so that's my view. I would like to hear your. Thank you.